Anzac Day is a national day of remembrance in Australia and New Zealand that commemorates the sacrifices made by soldiers in the First World War and other wars and battles thereafter. The soldiers who have fought in the war have left us with many valuable leadership lessons that can be applied to various aspects of life, leadership and business. In Australia, New Zealand and around the world, we have just celebrated this week, or observed this week, the Anzac Day. And today's topic is about Anzac Day, learning from the Anzacs. And I'm going to be sharing with you the top 5 leadership lessons resulting from the Anzac Day and the soldiers that went to war and battle over the years. Let's discuss.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas.
Welcome to the Ask Denis episode. This is a freestyle episode where I ask a question by our listeners, or I share my thoughts, experience, and insights from working with many leaders around the globe. Hey there, listeners. Let's get into today's topic, which is Anzac Day, learning from the Anzacs. Anzac Day is a time for us to remember, reflect, where we honour the brave soldiers who fought and sacrificed their lives in the First World War and many wars thereafter. These soldiers have left us with valuable lessons about leadership and about the way to continue to inspire people around the world. You know what? Their courage, their resilience, their selflessness, their communication and teamwork are qualities that we all can learn from and apply in our own lives, leadership and in business. Now, why leadership lessons we can learn from the Anzacs soldiers are valuable and inspiring, it is also important to acknowledge that war and conflict should be avoided whenever possible. Today we're going to discuss the top 5 leadership lessons that we can learn from the Anzac soldiers and how we can use these lessons to become better leaders in our own fields. Now, the Anzac stands for Australia New Zealand Army Corps, and then what we have done over the years is actually Australia and New Zealand as brothers and sisters in arms have gone out there to fight together as the Anzac. And so in this country and in Australia, we observe the Anzac Day on the 25th of April, and that's a special day for all of us to remember these soldiers. Alrighty, let's get into the top 5 leadership lessons. Number 1 is courage, one of the most important qualities of a leader, and that's any leader, is courage. Now, the soldiers who went to war, they had to face their fears and overcome challenges that most people could not imagine. They had to lead their troops into battle and often put their own lives on the line to protect others. Now, that could be the person beside you, and you didn't even have to have a rank of an officer and so forth. Anybody would have actually faced things that we could not imagine. Now, leaders in particular should be willing to take risks and face challenges head on, even when the odds seem stacked against them. You and I will face odds that are stacked against us at times. But what will you do with it is what's going to count. Are you going to be willing to take the risks and face the challenges head on, even though those odds may be stacked against you? Number 2 is resilience. Another important lesson that can be learned from the Anzac soldiers is resilience. They had to endure harsh conditions and constant danger, often with limited resources and support. You can imagine in those days how it would have been. Now, despite all these challenges, they continued to fight and remain committed to their cause. Now, leaders, in particular, we should be able to adapt to changing circumstances, remain positive in the face of adversity, and bounce back from setbacks. You see, how quickly we bounce back is really important. In coaching world, we talk about bouncing forward, actually. But if you can actually bounce back, that's going to be really important when we do face adversity, but we also need to remain positive. Number 3, selflessness. The soldiers who went to war demonstrated incredible selflessness. They put their needs of their country and their fellow soldiers above their own. Now, leaders, you should prioritize the needs of your team and be willing to make sacrifices for the greater good. the bigger picture, whatever that means for you. And they should also be willing to acknowledge the contribution of others and share the credit for their success. Nothing worse than a leader who takes the credit for other people's work and other people's success. Come on, it's about them. It's not about you. It's not about you being self-conscious. It's about you being audience or your team conscious. It's about them and what you can do on a daily basis to help them. Number 4 is communication. Effective communication is critical for success in any endeavor, and the soldiers who went to war were masters of communication. They had to be able to convey important information quickly and clearly, often in very challenging circumstances. You can imagine in the First World War, and maybe in the Second World War, but the First World War, how did they get messages to the front line? How did they get messages to the teams, to the platoons, out to the soldiers around the place? I don't think they actually had a mobile phone in those days, right? So what did they do and how did they do it? In very challenging circumstances. Now, leaders, we should prioritize communication, making sure that everyone is on the same page. But the important thing here is that the information that's shared is shared effectively. Too many times I meet people whereby they're not sharing the information, or they're not putting it in a way where people are going to understand it. They don't understand it, which means they won't go on the journey with you. Number 5 is teamwork. Now, finally, the Anzac soldiers demonstrated the importance of teamwork. They had to work together to achieve their goals, relying on each other for support and encouragement. Now, leaders should foster a strong sense of teamwork among their team, encouraging collaboration and cooperation. They should be willing to listen to the ideas and suggestions of others, recognizing that the best results often come from a collective effort. So if you're in an organization today, your team is communicating well, that's great. But with you and your peers, in other words, the team that you're part of as a leader, are you all working together and collaborating well? Because you tend to work in silos. So how can we break down those silos, and how can you work across all silos, all business units, all areas within the organization? Something for you to think about and something for you to do something about it. Because if you can work as a team, not just with your own team, but also across the teams, you're going to see massive kind of response. I want to remind you that, based on what I've been saying, is that while leadership lessons we can learn from these Anzac soldiers, they are valuable and inspiring. Once again, it's important to acknowledge that war and conflict should be avoided whenever possible. As a society, we should strive for peace and diplomacy rather than sorting to violence and warfare. It is important to remember that these lessons can be applied to all aspects of leadership, whether you're in business, whether you're in sports, or any other field. Remember this, that courage, resilience, selflessness, communication, and teamwork are qualities that can help us to achieve our goals, build strong relationships, and make positive impact on the world without resorting to war and conflict. As we stop and reflect on the sacrifices made by the Anzac soldiers, let us also strive for a world where we can resolve our differences peacefully without the need for violence and war. In conclusion, the Anzac soldiers have set an example for us all through their leadership and sacrifice. Their bravery, resilience, selflessness, communication, and teamwork are qualities that we all can strive to embody in our personal and professional lives. By learning from these lessons from the Anzac soldiers, we can become better leaders, better team players, and better human beings. So as we observe the Anzac Day in this part of the world and across the world as well, let's honor these soldiers by embracing the qualities that made them great, and by continuing to strive for that better world where we see peace and understanding, lest we forget. All right, listeners, every week I give you 2 calls of action. My call of action to you this week is based on those Anzac soldiers and those 5 leadership attributes. Which ones should you be focusing on this week? I'd like you to write down the 5, think about them, and then decide which one, or if it's all 5, great. But what are you going to focus on? And then what are you going to do? What's 1, 2, or 3 things you're going to do around each of those 5 different things? Because you see, even if you just implement one of them and you do very well, that's going to make a huge difference as well. Now, the second call to action is around an offer again, and I have 2 coaching spots available. And if you are unfulfilled in your current role and you wish you could do something else and your cravings for something more, then you might want to work with me and help understand how you might be able to make that leap. There may be some of you who are listening to this who have been made redundant of late. And the thing here is that if you would like clarity around your next steps, and if you'd like to step forward with purpose and confidence, maybe we should work together. In fact, why don't we have a chat? Because I can talk to you about what our executive coaching can provide around tools and guidance, and about a system, a blueprint that I have to help you become successful. If you're an executive looking for more success and climbing up in the ladders, then let's chat. If you're an executive who's looking to do that crossover for going into a higher position or starting your own business, then let's chat. If this sounds like you, then please feel free to reach out to me and let's get on a free strategy call and discuss what your needs are and then how I can help you make the leap. Hey listeners, well that's it for this episode. It's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for joining me on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.